The arrival. The old toy store had been abandoned for years. Dust coated the shelves and cobwebs draped across forgotten dolls and stuffed animals. Mark, a young security guard, had taken the night shift for extra cash. It was just another quiet night until he heard the faint sound of laughter. He gripped his flashlight tightly and followed the eerie giggle to the back of the store. There, propped on a dusty wooden chair, was a small, tattered doll with fiery red hair and menacing blue eyes. Chucky. His overalls were faded and his shorts were torn at the edges. It looked like just another old toy, but something about it sent chills down Mark's spine. Then the doll's head twitched. Mark stumbled backward, his flashlight shaking. He tried to convince himself it was his imagination, but the giggling returned, louder this time. 2. The game begins. Mark turned to leave, but the store's lights flickered, plunging the room into darkness. A sharp whisper echoed in the silence. "You should have left when you had the chance." A rustling sound came from behind him. His breath hitched as he turned back. Chucky was no longer in the chair. Something scurried across the floor. Mark barely had time to react before a sharp pain sliced across his ankle. He fell to the ground, gasping. A tiny figure darted past his vision, the glint of a knife in its hand. "You want to play, Mark?" Chucky sneered. Mark scrambled backward, his hands shaking. This couldn't be real. It had to be a nightmare. But the blood on his ankle told him otherwise. 3. The chase Mark forced himself to his feet and limped toward the exit. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. He fumbled with his key card, his sweaty fingers slipping. A high-pitched laugh erupted from the shadows. Mark spun around, but Chucky was gone. Silence stretched through the store until a small voice whispered right behind him, "Run." A flash of red hair streaked past his vision. The knife slashed through the air, missing his face by inches. Mark stumbled into a shelf, knocking over dolls that crashed to the ground, their glassy eyes staring blankly. He grabbed a metal pipe from the floor, swinging wildly. "Get away from me, you little freak!" Chucky cackled, ducking beneath the swing. "That's not very nice, Marky boy." The doll leaped at him, slashing at his leg again. Mark screamed, kicking Chucky across the room. The doll hit the wall with a sickening crack, but didn't stay down for long. Slowly he rose, his head tilting unnaturally. His ripped shorts fluttered as he dusted himself off, his grin widening. "Oh, now you've done it," Chucky growled. The horror unfolds. Mark limped toward the exit, but the doors wouldn't budge. The store had locked itself. Chucky's laugh echoed once more. "No one's coming to save you." The shadows twisted around Mark, the flickering lights casting monstrous shapes on the walls. The toy store was alive, its silence thick with menace. Then from the darkness, Chucky lunged. Mark barely dodged the knife, but he tripped over a fallen doll. Chucky was on him in an instant, his tiny hands gripping the blade, his blue eyes gleaming with wicked delight. "Time to say goodnight, Mark." With a desperate yell, Mark grabbed a shelf and yanked it down. A cascade of toys and boxes crashed onto Chucky, burying him. Silence. Mark panted, his entire body shaking. He stepped back, his eyes darting around. No movement. Maybe, just maybe, he'd won. Then, a hand burst through the pile. Chucky climbed out, his ripped shorts now stained with dust and grime. His plastic face was cracked, revealing something dark and twisted beneath. "You just don't learn, do you?" 5. The final stand. Mark had no choice. He grabbed a broken toy sword from the ground and held it like a weapon. Chucky's grin never faltered. "I'm gonna enjoy this," the doll sneered. Chucky charged. Mark swung the sword, slicing through the air. The blade caught Chucky's overalls, tearing them further. But it didn't stop him. With unnatural speed, Chucky leapt onto Mark's back, wrapping his tiny arms around his throat. Mark gasped, struggling to pry the doll off. He slammed himself against a wall, crushing Chucky between him and the bricks. The doll shrieked in rage but didn't let go. His knife flashed, cutting into Mark's shoulder. Blood trickled down his arm as he let out a strangled cry. With one last burst of strength, Mark grabbed Chucky and hurled him across the room. The doll slammed into a glass display case, shattering it into a million shards. For a moment, everything was still. Then Chucky stirred, his movements slower, glitching like a broken machine. His plastic limbs twitched and his blue eyes flickered. Mark knew he had one chance. He grabbed a can of lighter fluid from a shelf, his hands shaking as he poured it over the doll. Chucky's eyes widened. "Wait!" Mark didn't wait. He flicked his lighter and dropped it. The flames